Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, we've got the first two games on the NBA calendar set, and there's some potential for some major overreaction by Lakers fans. You know how much we like that. We'll talk about that and more with Trevor Lane of Lakers Nation next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, always free, never behind a paywall. If you got to make another Lakers podcast your second listen, how about the ones they do over there at Lakers Nation? Always putting out great stuff. And joining us today, a voice you hear all the time on that, the boss, the honcho, the man over at Lakers Nation, Trevor Lane. Thanks so much for coming on. It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Been enjoying the summer, and we've been getting a lot more Lakers news, deeper into August now than I expected. But you know what? We still have plenty of rumors and stuff like that to dive into, so I can't complain.
Yeah, it's been this really incredible confluence of emotion, like just things at a standstill, but these different details that come out of the standstill that give us something brand new to talk about. We have all been talking about the exact same thing, Trevor, for like 2 months. We're basically just on a hamster wheel, and every now and then they put in a different spoke in that wheel, and we're like, ooh, new thing to talk about. But it really is Groundhog Day with basketball.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We've been going around. In fact, I've got a lot of Lakers fans who are saying, oh my gosh, no more trade rumors. Just something happen. Make something happen. Somehow pull the trigger. I've been telling them I'll get Rob Pelinka on the phone and I'll kind of nudge him in the right direction, but for whatever reason, he doesn't listen to me.
Well, Can't you guys make him pull it off? Let's get this going.
Trevor, I don't mean to brag, and I know that the Lakers Nation traffic is exceptionally strong itself, so this may seem like nothing to you, but Brian and I recently, the Locked On Lakers YouTube page just passed 1 million views. So I kind of feel like if Brian and I put Pelinka's feet to the fire with this juice that we now have, we might actually be able to make this happen.
We should be able to get something like that done, right? There's got to be enough flex there.
If you guys and us, if we combined forces and basically just said, yo, Pelinka, the people are getting impatient. Yeah.
TikTok, Rob.
Like if we did something original and I don't know, like organized a protest out in front of Crypto Arena or something like that. Something that's never been done before.
We've had a good one of those.
Well, it has never happened at Crypto.
True.
Like it's happened at Staples before, but that was passé. This is the new.
We learned that if you protest outside a center, it doesn't work. But if you protest outside an arena, it might. So we'll see. We did get a small bit of news. We're going to get into all kinds of stuff about trades and this and that. Do want to remind everybody, Saturday, August 27th, 11 a.m., Andy and I will be at the Doer store recording a live episode of Locked On Lakers mailbag episode. Hashtag Doer Show is how you submit to get a question into that show. And if we pull your name as part of that, you can win a prize pack from our friends over at Doer. 170 South La Brea in LA, shopdoer.com. If you can't make it,
you're eligible as well, Trevor. If you want both a question answered and some
we're not related.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You're not paid by the show.
I'll throw something in there.
There you go.
Do you wear pants? So if you wear pants, you're eligible.
There's no proof. This show only shoots me from the waist up. So you never
Trevor
know.
may run Lakers Nation, but he puts his pants on one leg at a time. Like
business on the top, party on the bottom is what Trevor's saying. So we'll get to all your preferences on trades and when you think this stuff's going to resolve itself, how good you think the team is, where they stack up in the West. We did get a little bit of news over the weekend. October 18th, the Lakers will be there for the ring ceremony, opening night. Golden State Warriors will get their stuff at the Chase Center, and
so will Juan Toscano-Anderson.
That's right. It's ring night. He doesn't have to wait very long. The Lakers will be there for that. 2 days later, I don't know if it's a home game or a road game. Doesn't really matter. The Lakers will play the Clippers at the Crypt. So 2 games against 2, certainly one very much contender, another quasi contender if the Clippers are healthy. What was your reaction when you saw this? Because Andy and I have both said, like, this is a season where the Lakers need to get off to a good start. It would really help if they get off to a good start. And not to be terribly cynical, they could come out and surprise a little bit or make these good quality games. There's also a chance they could lose both of these by 20.
Yeah, that was my initial reaction. It came out. I was recording the front office show with Keith Smith, who was a Celtics guy, when this came out. And I told him, I said, see, Keith, this is just proof the NBA hates the Lakers. That's why they're giving you the Warriors, the defending champs, and then the Clippers, who on paper have one of the best teams in the Western Conference in the NBA. Really, that's a really tough 1-2 punch to have to go through. And then there was that little glimmer of hope that, well, maybe the Clippers are going to be on the second night of a back-to-back here, because the 18th is the season opener. The Lakers play the Warriors that day. Maybe the Clippers will play the 19th, and then they have to play the Lakers on the 20th. No, this is going to be the season opener for the Clippers on the 20th, so they will be rested. It's tough, but at the same time, I thought last year the Lakers had a really easy schedule. It was a difficult start just like this, but a really easy schedule early, and they kind of fumbled it there, and then it really caught up with them in the back half of the schedule. So I'm hoping to some degree that it's not quite so tilted in either direction, that we see a schedule that's a nice mix of tough teams along with a few other winnable games that are in there in the early going. So maybe getting 2 tough teams right out of the gate is a sign that they'll have a more balanced schedule for the season. That's my hope. But the potential for disaster is certainly high when you're playing 2 teams of that caliber right out of the gate.
Because Trevor's point is an interesting one, because we were talking about last season just kind of off air as we were planning out our week and all that kind of stuff. And I think you asked me what their record was last year through 15 games. And I was like, I think they were about 500. It was like 8-7 or something like that, which I think is what it was. It
was 8-7.
But Trevor, you reminded me that it was 8-7 against a terribly weak schedule. So it was a very panicky 8-7. On the one hand, something like that, where the Lakers could kind of ease into the year, get some wins under their belt, it's a lot of moving parts, potentially a lot, depending on what happens the rest of the season, the off season. What would you rather have, Andy? That kind of very winnable schedule, but the downside is if you don't actually win those games, it's much worse.
I would rather actually have the tougher slate out of the gate for a couple reasons. First of all, I think there's more information that you can get from going up against really good teams, or at least theoretically good teams from the beginning. It obviously doesn't tell you everything that you need to know, and you don't want to react in either direction. But I do think that in certain respects, the information that you can get from it, however much it means in 2 games, is more valuable against good teams than bad teams. But also, too, and hopefully this is not an issue this season, given the way things began in the preseason last year. But last year, the Lakers treated the preseason and the opening of the season like Rocky did against Clubber Lang. Like he was just screwing around and taking photos with fans and stuff like that. And he clearly just thought he had this thing locked up. And the Lakers entered last season really buying into their own hype. And, particularly the preseason, half the guys didn't play. They didn't really take anything serious. I would like to think that wouldn't be the case this year. But if you're looking for a preventative, it's Golden State and the Clippers right out of the gate. Like you are going to have to be focused for games like that. And I think it's good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, particularly with those 2 teams, you've got the defending champs. You're going to be watching them get their rings, which sometimes you see teams on ring night, they're not the most focused squad when they go out there and play right after getting their rings. And maybe
the rule that says you have to wear them during the game really does help the other team.
Tends to weigh you down just a little bit. Throws off your shot too. So there's that. But I do think you're going to get a bit more focus when you've got that challenge there in front of you. Now, I would hope that with as many, like the Lakers had so many veterans last year, there was kind of that, we've been there, done that. We know what the season's all about. We're going to just coast through it, and we're going to be healthy for the playoffs. And that seemed like that was their focal point from the get-go. And I was completely nervous, because I'm the type that says, you know what, NBA, the way you win in the NBA, the way you get where you want to be in playoff seeding, it's not about beating the good teams. It's about beating the bad teams. It's about taking those games that are put on your schedule that are against some of the bottom tier teams in the NBA. You go out there, you take care of business, you say thank you, you stack up that win to buffer you for later on when you come up against some of the more difficult teams where you're not going to have as high of a chance to get that W. So you've got to make sure that you're focused then. So when I look at these 2 games out of the gate, that'll be tough. If the Lakers come out there and they have to really battle, hopefully that sets the tone so that when they do hit the easier opponents at different points of their schedule, they're already locked in, as opposed to last season where they just never really found that focus. And again, that could be a veteran versus youth thing. And this is a much younger team. So hopefully they'll come out with something improved.
If the rest of the schedule, like the opening 10 games, are basically at the caliber of Warriors and Clippers, and it's just that type of brutal slate that the Lakers could fall into like a 2-8 hole and create panic, that's how you know, like, even the league wants the Lakers to trade Westbrook.
You said something interesting, Trevor. You talked about, like, you know, how you make the playoffs, the playoff seeding and all that. ESPN last week forecasted the Lakers at 42 wins and a play-in team, the bottom part of the play-in, by the way, not even one of the better teams in there. So we want to get your thoughts on how you think the Lakers look right now in the Western Conference. And then from there, what you think a tweak to the roster might do in many of the forms that are out there in the rumors that we've been talking about. So we'll do all that next with Trevor Lane of Lakers Nation.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Doer, the sponsors of the Locked On Lakers podcast. Just this show, just us in the network, and they are the purveyors of the world's most comfortable pants. They got a great promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your purchase. And we love being involved with Doer because this is clothing created with the belief that comfort, style, and function, they all exist to complement each other in design. And you can just wear a pair of Doer pants on your bike. If you're, I guess, one of those environmentally friendly types, you ride that to work, you go to work, you crush it at work. Then afterwards, you get back on your bike and you meet up with some friends at dinner to talk about crushing it at work, all while wearing the exact same pair of pants. They're also made with ultralight tensile. It's moisture wicking and antibacterial, which means by definition, your clothes, when you are wearing Doer, not gross. Everything else you're wearing that is not moisture wicking and not antibacterial, disgusting. Go to the Doer store in LA, 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City, or order online, shopdoer.com, DUER. Either way, use our code, again, LOCKEDON15, to get 15% off your order. Again, LOCKEDON15, 15% off DUER. Doer, the world's most comfortable pants.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by Built. If you haven't tried the Built Puffs yet, you are really depriving yourself. So my kid, we get the Doer people, the Built people are really kind, and they send us bars so we can taste them and talk about them and all that kind of stuff. And my kid reached into the cabinet on his way to soccer camp for an entire week, and each day took my Built cookie dough chunk puff bars. He just took them. He just took them to soccer because he loved them. He thought they were super tasty, covered in real chocolate. You got the cookie dough chunks and all that, which is great because it's 160 calories with 15 grams of protein, the collagen protein, the good stuff. And he's a growing kid, and he's out there in the sun running around and all that. And so I'm happy, Andy, he's eating stuff without a lot of sugar. And that's like real food. So you're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, whether your kids are stealing them, a late night snack, whatever it is. It is the perfect protein bar. They taste better than a candy bar. You can ditch the fat, you can ditch the sugar, you can ditch the calories. And if you go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15, you can get 15% off your order. Again, locked on 15 to get 15% off at built.com. Okay, so I mentioned it, ESPN 42 wins, Trevor. I thought, obviously I think the Lakers are healthy. They can win more, but that's a big if. I actually thought that was a relatively fair evaluation within a few games, given the roster and given the health questions around them. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I couldn't complain about that, particularly with what we saw last season and just the lack of chemistry, the lack of cohesiveness that we saw from this team. I don't have any problem with putting them right there. We haven't seen that big trade from them. We haven't seen them. Kyrie Irving isn't on this team right now. It's Russell Westbrook still. And so with that, I don't think you can project the Lakers to be this, 3 seed or something like that in the Western Conference. I think the potential is there. Look, if LeBron and Anthony Davis stay healthy all season, they've got a puncher's chance against just about anybody, particularly if you get the bounce back season that we're hoping to see from AD. But I don't think you can project that when you're trying to figure out win totals and you're trying to predict forward what they've got coming up. So I think that that's a pretty fair number. It wasn't anything that offended me. I'd have a hard time picking the over-under on that number right now.
I mean, first of all, let's not poo-poo a 9-game improvement from last season. And going from
Darvin Ham would be in line for coach of the year. It's a 9-game improvement.
11 seed to the 9 seed. Like, yeah, it lets you know they're moving in the right direction. By season 4 with Westbrook, these guys are going to be probably like they're going to be like one of the teams to beat.
You are such a troll.
I really am. I'm a jerk. You know, it's funny though, Trevor, when you were talking about LeBron and AD, if they are healthy, this team has a puncher's chance against anybody. I think that's true, but B, I think it's also a reminder that when you think about how the Lakers are going to look next season and try to project them against everybody else, it is important to remember that with all the flaws, or at least potential flaws of this roster, and we're going to dissect them over the course of this show, everything that could have possibly gone wrong with this team last year did. Like it was a disaster beyond just bringing in Russell Westbrook, which is the way a lot of this stuff is framed. And if things don't go so sideways on so many different levels, the roster as it stands still has issues that you have to contend with. And Russell Westbrook is still going to be an awkward fit, but some of that awkwardness doesn't matter as much if LeBron and AD are there, if Kendrick Nunn, represents a live, living human player, if THT actually looks like the guy that they thought he was going to be last year, if they're able to run more than they did, because they've got younger legs, if they have a coach that I think people are more invested in. Again, it doesn't solve everything, but I think it's important to keep that in mind, especially too, because there's also, I think, sometimes this sort of projection for these other teams, like everything is going to go perfect for them. Like, that ESPN poll had the Clippers at 50 wins, which is certainly possible if Kawhi and Paul George both stay healthy. The reality is we've seen no evidence of that over the last few years either. So that projection may have as much wishful thinking as Laker fans, I guess, would feel like they didn't get that benefit of the doubt from ESPN.
Right, but the flip side, though, Andy and Trevor, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like the Clippers won 42 games last year and had almost as many things go wrong for them in terms of their star players as the Lakers did. The Nuggets won 48 and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. barely played. So it's like the evidence is also there too. It's like, it's not like things went swimmingly for every other team in the league. And the Lakers just got, kneecapped. I mean, that to me is sort of like when I look at it, Trevor, kind of how I balance out. Andy's not wrong. I just don't know if I don't, it's going to sound kind of cold. I don't know how much that matters because I feel like that happens every year to every team. Like very few teams have everything go right for them.
Yeah, but I don't know how many, before we get to Trevor, have everything go as wrong as they did for the Lakers.
Well, ones that win 33 games when they're supposed to win 55. Like, the wheels definitely fell off. I'm not trying to say otherwise.
I mean, the wheels fell off in, like you guys said, pretty much every single way they possibly could. I mean, as much as people want to point and say, oh, this is on Russell Westbrook, you can't bring this guy back because everything happened last season because of him. That's not accurate. There were a lot of things that happened last season, from COVID to coaching. You had 41 different starting lineups in an 82-game season. Like, that's absurd to have any kind of chemistry out on the floor. It's impossible when that's the situation that you're in. They had all kinds of injuries that took place. You had Isaiah Thomas on the floor for a while. You had Darren Collison. You had all kinds of different players rotating in and out of the lineup. So it was a lot of things that created the situation that the Lakers had. But I think you're right in that, look, during an NBA season, you have to be able to adapt and overcome to some degree. And we saw the Nuggets, while they didn't get to where they wanted to go, they at least weathered the storm certainly better than the Lakers did. The Clippers, yeah. I mean, the Clippers were pretty good, especially considering the stuff that they dealt with. The Lakers, they hit adversity and they packed it up and they said, oh, no, this isn't for us. The storm's raging. We're going inside. We're not going to deal with this. So we haven't seen this team adapt and overcome to the same degree as the other teams in the Western Conference. So I'm okay with the Clippers being projected higher. I'm okay with the Nuggets being projected higher because those guys have shown most recently that even if they do hit that adversity, they're going to find a way to push through. And the Lakers just haven't proven that yet. And they should take that as a challenge when they look at that and they see their win total that's being projected. They should say that is insulting to us, and we have to go out there and prove them wrong because we have to figure out a way to win more games than that.
So, Andy, one of the things that I think is kind of interesting about your framing that is, how confident are you in some of those things? So there's a lot of ifs, but not all ifs are created equal, and not all ifs, are that outrageous. All of them happening, maybe, maybe not. But, Kendrick Nunn being healthy is not an outrageous if. But, we Silver Screen and Roll, I think it was Alex Regler wrote a great article about how you could expect Austin Reeves' three-point percentage to improve based on hitting the rookie wall last year, which he won't this year. Stuff like that. You talked about THT, Andy. Sort of some of these. What are the things that you are most confident in terms of your, if this goes right, the Lakers are set up to do better perhaps than people think?
Well, I mean, not to argue against my own premise, but not a lot.
Oh,
I mean, well,
I was kind of relying on you to be a little more optimistic here. Because people are like, you guys are so negative.
Well, no. I think what I said does have validity to it. And I do think that it would be very difficult for the Lakers to have as catastrophic a season as they had last year on so many different counts. Mm-hmm. I think also, there's a tendency, I think, to doomcast from last year's team, despite the fact that this year's roster is very different than last year's roster. Like they're not bringing back a lot of the faulty foundation from last year, other than, I guess, Westbrook.
Right. And it's telling, too, how faulty the foundation is. None of those people have jobs.
And it's the biggest reason, though, I said that I might end up arguing against myself is just I am growing increasingly less confident that LeBron and AD are a viable duo moving forward, because LeBron, it's very clear that the mileage and the wear and tear and just everything that he's done over the course of now heading into 19 seasons is catching up to him. I mean, like he's no longer the cyborg that everybody used to treat him as. And he needs that pressure being taken off him by AD. And AD is not somebody that you can rely on. I mean, we can talk about how much he actually is capable of removing that pressure if he is on the court, but just him being on the court is increasingly feeling more like wish casting.
So, Trevor, let me ask you this, because, and I'll ask you the question, and I'll give you a chance to think about it over the break. How much of the Lane family fortune would you be willing to risk on an over-under of LeBron and Anthony Davis average 67 games between them? So that's the question for you. Get out, run to the, get your finances out, see how much you have to wager on this. But because it really is the nut of the whole thing. So that's the question for next. All right. I hope you've had some time to contemplate and do a little math. How confident are you in that? The idea that those two guys would average 67 games this season?
I would probably be betting the under on it, unfortunately. But when I look at that, it wouldn't be a lot. I mean, we've heard a great number of things about Anthony Davis and, how he's, going to be more physically prepared for this season. But you know what? Tell myself this every year during the offseason. This is like the honeymoon phase. Everybody's 0 for 0. Everybody's put on 12 to 15 pounds of muscle. Everybody's in the best shape of their lives. I try not to buy into this stuff too much.
Except us three.
No. I look fantastic. I'm rested. I'm tan. Let's do this.
I'm working on the tan part of that. There'll be more of that to come. But but we've got, when I look at it, how much would I wager on that? I mean, 20% tops. Like, I mean, you're not going to bet a ton on these guys being healthy for 67 games. Like you said, LeBron, that kind of aura of invincibility isn't quite there anymore. And as much as I've argued against Anthony Davis being injury prone, and I've talked all about how the injuries last season were kind of fluky, he had 2 major injuries. A guy falls into his knee, he lands on somebody else's foot. It's still, I don't feel super confident projecting that he's going to be available for 70 plus games. And I do think we're going to see some pretty aggressive load management too, which is going to factor into that.
So aside from that, when you look at what they are now, and we'll pivot next to what we think they might become if they can pull off one of these deals. What do you see as the biggest problems? What do you see as the best potential sort of high points of the roster, particularly given what you just said about the concerns about health?
Yeah, I think that with this team, what they did is they took the areas where they found success last season. Like, hey, look, Stanley Johnson, we get a guy who's in his 20s. He can come in here and actually contribute and give us minutes. Austin Reeves, same thing. Wenyen Gabriel, right? I mean, they found these guys kind of off the trash heap, so to speak, found that, digging through the bottom of the barrel. Certainly didn't sign Austin Reeves last season thinking he was going to be a rotation piece, certainly not a key rotation piece, but they found success surrounding LeBron, surrounding AD, surrounding Russ with younger players, relative success compared to what they were having otherwise. And so you saw them go out and get a lot of those types of players again here. And that's the reason for optimism here with this team is you look and you say, you know what, in general, young players tend to get better. So you look at the age of Lonnie Walker, you look at Troy Brown Jr., Juan Toscano Anderson's 29, but Thomas Bryant coming off of an injury. You brought in younger guys that tend to get better year after year. Taylor Horton Tucker, of course, still 21. He needs to show improvement as well. So just in terms of organic, natural growth, there's some reason for optimism there. But when you look at this roster as a whole, the biggest concern has got to be the shooting. They got younger. They got more athletic. Hopefully there's going to be some natural growth there. But shooting-wise, the stats do not look good at all. If LeBron James is your best shooter, that's a big concern. And that's probably what we're looking at right now, even if we do see improvement.
You want the floor space for LeBron. You do not want LeBron spacing the floor.
Exactly. So that's the big concern with this team, where you're kind of right now, you're looking at it and you're keeping your fingers crossed and hoping, can Stanley Johnson become a league average 3-point shooter? What about Austin Reeves? Can something, Troy Brown Jr., where does he fall into that? Can Lonnie Walker get his 3-point percentage back up? It's all of these guys where you could say with some confidence that they can do that, but still we're talking about at best average shooters. So that's my biggest concern for this team right now, is how all the pieces fit around that particular issue. And then when you add in Russell Westbrook to the mix, that compounds that particular problem with shooting and the floor spacing and all of that.
Nope, not when they stick him in the left corner. Like we saw Darvin say, they're going to make him a corner guy, but only the one corner. And nobody in the opposing scouting report, Andy, is going to catch on to that.
Honestly, we went through this, Brian, on Friday's show. If you limit Russ to largely corner threes, or maybe even made it just half corner threes, half above the break, as opposed to 7/8 above the break, where he shot, I believe, 26%. Russ was actually pretty good from the left corner, below average from the right corner, but not so below average that I think on balance in the corners, he kills them. You have to make the best of an inelegant, imperfect situation. If you can start getting Russ more of those shots, because he's going to have to take them at some point in the corners, that's a win. Like, it's a relative win, but Trevor, I still think it's a win.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you can get him to do those things, but that's the if. We've been saying that for years, right? Like, hey, Russ needs to shoot corner threes. He needs to set screens. He needs to be willing to roll to the basket. He needs to be comfortable off the ball. He needs to focus on defense. All the stuff that Darvin Ham has been saying, it's not new. The question is, can Darvin Ham be the guy to actually get him to do that and not shoot 20-foot jumpers in transition with 21 seconds left on the shot clock? We'll see. We'll see. I'm going to be skeptical until we actually see it happen.
Where do you fall on the? There are a lot of fans, certainly we hear from them. I'm sure you hear from them too, who are in the you cannot, if they haven't traded him, you cannot show up to training camp with Russell Westbrook as an active player. Just send him home. If you can't trade him, send him home, because he's too destructive to have on the floor. Versus Andy and I are very much in the you don't have enough talent to not at least give it a try. So where are you in that argument?
I'm in the same corner as you guys are. I think that you don't have enough talent. I also think he's too expensive to just send home and not even try it. You have to give it a shot. You have to, before you're going to be willing to spend $47 million to pay someone to not play basketball for you, you have to find out, can they actually be on the floor? And maybe that's a small percentage chance. There's a lot of people that have no faith in Russ, and I understand that. But you've got a new coach. You brought him in for a reason. He's very confident that he can make things work with Russ. you have to at least give him that opportunity. The only way you don't do it is if Darvin Ham is saying, Russ, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And Russ is just flat out saying, nope, not going to do that. That's not going to happen. I'm Russell Westbrook. I do these things, not that stuff.
Checking his phone like Ben Simmons with Doc Rivers last year.
Right. That's just it. That's the only way. You just send him home. Otherwise, you have to at least try, even though you can still be skeptical. And I am, that it's going to work. You've got to give it a chance if he's still on the roster.
Well, Trevor, are you familiar with my Russ gets 10 minutes per game to do whatever?
I have heard it. Yep.
Yes. Russell Westbrook. This is my approach for trying to do this. Russell Westbrook gets 10 minutes per game where it is Russ's show. Russ, everything runs through Russ. Russ is the one making all the decisions, even if LeBron and AD are out there for 10 minutes per game, and it is on a strict clock. This is Russ. Once you hit 10:01, though, it is back to Russ has to do what's being asked of him, and however many more minutes Russ plays is up to Darvin Ham's discretion and purely based on Russ not just being Russ. What do you think of this approach, Trevor?
I think this sounds like it is the NBA version or in-game version of the Purge, where there's no rules.
Yes,
we need a siren to go off, and that is Russell Westbrook. Maybe the lights in the arena change, and then Russ gets to be unleashed, and then as soon as that ends, you go back. You go back to normalcy.
So, Trevor has been kind enough to agree to hang out, bleed into a second show. So a doubleheader, a cliffhanger, because we want to find out from Trevor what he thinks the Lakers can be if they pull off one of these trades that's theoretically out there, whether Brooklyn, Utah, Indiana, something like that. And how likely he thinks any of those things are to happen. But to hear his answer, you're going to have to wait until Tuesday. Reminder, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to see all the fun. The Doers Shop on 170 South La Brea in Los Angeles. We'll be there on August 27th at 11 a.m. taping a live mailbag of the show. You can win some prizes by contributing questions. #DoersShow. We'll see everybody on Tuesday.